Hello to Bowser Sports, and today we're going to focus on the Penguins and the trade deadline. And specifically, we're going to kind of hit on four players you see here: Rakell, Noel Acciari, Anthony Beauvillier, and Erik Karlsson. So a little bit of news and notes before we get into the deadline. The Pens today, Monday, had demoted Joel Blomqvist to the AHL and recalled Tristan Jarry from Wilkes-Barre. Not a surprise if you listen to my last episode. It was about time to get Blomqvist down before they destroyed the young man's confidence level with where he was at after yesterday's game against the Maple Leafs. Also, the Pens put P.O. Joseph on the 7-day IR, retroactive to his last game when he got injured against the Bruins. They also signed right shot defenseman Finn Harding to a 3-year entry level contract. We still have the next game coming up here is against the Avs at 9 o'clock tomorrow night, Tuesday. And then as a reminder, the trade deadline is Friday, 3 p.m. So let's first kind of take a look and focus on these four players. First we're going to talk about Rakell. I think the question here is, do the Pens move their most dynamic winger, and do they once again move another left winger off of Crosby's line for the betterment of the team's long-term future? As we saw with the Jake Gensel trade, they did not get a top-line player that plug and play into the lineup. They got nice pieces as part of the Gensel trade with Carolina. If the Pens are going to move Rakell, I think that needs to be a different story. It's got to be a clear acquisition to get a player and top prospect type of player to move. We know from a team perspective who's out there, I would think Florida Panthers are going to make a move with Matt Tkachuk on the long-term IR now, likely out for the remainder of the regular season with a hip and groin. You have Dallas Stars missing Tyler Seguin, and they've got the cap space to use. And of course, I'm starting to read some things and hear things about with the Kings, and they need scoring help. And they look to bring Rakell back out to the West Coast after a number of years playing for the Anaheim Ducks. The team that I think to focus on though is Utah, the hockey club, right? So I think with their owner, they're going to be desperate to make the playoffs in their first season in Utah. I think that is something that they're definitely going to push for. So I could see their general manager be given the green light to, for sure, move a first round pick in 2025. They're going to be in the middle of the pack anyway. So what hurts getting a top two line winger who can play left or right side and has got 2 more years on his deal. And so I think for immediate acquisition cost, Utah easily going to give up that first round pick to get a top line player. I think Matias Maccelli, left winger as a player, is a potential to be thrown in the deal to help make some of the salary cap stuff work. And then as he's having a down year, by the way, but he's only 23, 24, 25 in that range. So you're getting a guy who's 5-6 years younger than Rakell right now, and then who can, I would think, could immediately join on Crosby's and Rust line and fit into that left wing position. And then last, I think the biggest part of the acquisition that I would like to see the team is target a team who's got a center prospect that could be potentially able to lift out of their organization. The guy that I'm thinking of is Cole Bowden, and he is 6'2", 200 pounds center prospect from in the OHL. I think he's got about 20 some goals this season in 40 some games. He had a controversial, kneeing penalty, I think, in the World Juniors here over the, during the Christmas, holiday break into that tournament. And so I think he's a guy who could become a second, third line center. The team needs to identify guys with size, with speed. You've got two-way playmaking ability. You're not going to get a first-line center in a trade like this uh, unless he really takes off. And I think he's a guy who could, come in next year and compete for a spot or as a third line center potentially, if that's where the team looks to get him, or maybe he gets, another season of training in the AHL or in the OHL again. And so I, at the end of the day, as much as I think a deal with Utah would help the organization from a depth perspective, bringing another quality player who can immediately fit in, I believe with Crosby. I don't see a trade happening here. I think at the come the trade deadline, I think Dubas is in his mind is going to do right by Sidney Crosby, and he's going to keep Rakell around through at least this season. So next up we've got is Noel Acciari. I really think teams are going to value his low cap hit. He's a no to low maintenance veteran who can play center or wing for you. He's got playoff experience. He's someone who will go out there and block shots on your penalty kill. So I think he's a relatively low value return. So you're probably thinking a fourth round pick at best, more likely a fifth round. I think the value for the Penguins by getting a fourth or a fifth, or even if it's a sixth or seventh, is going to be freeing up that roster spot, both from a contract out of the 50 number that you have teams can have, and as well as freeing up fourth line spot for someone to come in and play in that role. Because I do think the team needs to get Vasily Ponomarev into the fourth line role, playing with Lizotte in the left wing. I think they should put Cody Glass as the right winger and kind of nail down that fourth line that has speed, can forecheck, and can make some plays, with the puck. I think Chari is what he is. He's a hand grenade controlling the puck, and so I think he would fit nicely though with the team that's trying to get over the hump with some veteran players like Jamie Benn. I really do think Dallas is probably the team that could fit him in with what the kind of system they play and the style. I don't know about Florida. Florida, he could fit in. Again, depends on what they're trying to do with to check out. I listed here also Tampa Bay because again, similar style, fourth line grinder. They could be looking just to shore up their penalty killing and experience, both at center and right wing. After they lost a couple players like Nick Cousins, over the summer to Ottawa. So we shall see what happens with Acciari, but again, I think he's a guy who should absolutely move at this deadline. Next up, we have is Anthony Beauvillier. Again, I think he's another guy who's having a really good season. He's a low cost, player here. I think he's worked hard all year, especially becoming in a rotation with the penalty kill. He's kind of bounced around between the first and the second line. He's also been playing third and fourth line in minutes. He's been a healthy scratch, but he scored 13 goals in 62 games. So I would look for Beauvillier to stick around potentially if the Pens do move Rakell, and don't get anyone who could kind of immediately slot into that left wing position. I think there's value to keep someone who can play that type of role. Beauvillier then could be re-signed cheaply. He's only making over I think $1.25 million, so low cap hit. I don't think he'd probably cost much more. Maybe in that 2 to 3 million range is probably where he's hoping to get. I think you settle on 2.5. I think you got to deal with the guy on another 1 to 2 year deal, and he's got good speed. Eventually he should be able to slide down into your bottom six type of role. Especially if you ever decide to do something with Blake Lizotte in the fourth line. Again, if you're moving around, trade chips and things of that nature, and on those bottom six roles, they should be interspersible for now until you get a long-term guy who can fit into the role. So I think you're going to see similar here. I think Dallas is a team, Tampa is a team, another team I think it's going to be looking for speed as they always do, which is Winnipeg. And that's where I think if he does move, Winnipeg is probably the destination for Beauvillier. And then last up here was we have just a continuation of the previous episodes about Erik Karlsson. I don't think that he's going to move because of cap space. I think a lot of teams are going to have a hard time fitting him in. Based upon hearing Karlsson talk, my belief on where Dubas is at, and things I've read, I think Dubas most likely wants to move that contract. He's not a fit in Sullivan's system. He's made some really bad plays. He hasn't lived up to his contract. He hasn't lived up to the trade assets that the team had to give up to get him. And so as a result, I think Karlsson's going to be interested to move along, look for a team who's in playoff contention, and hopefully he can make a run this year or next year or the year after, with since he's got 2 years left, and hope to win a cup. And so, I think Karlsson will weigh that if he's asked, and I think as long as that is a quality team, or a team on the rise, I think he would think about doing it. And I think two teams are the Detroit Red Wings and the Calgary Flames. The question will be, you heard things about Dallas immediately coming out saying they don't have interest in Karlsson. It's going to be about what team's willing to take the gamble that Karlsson will come in and play a solid two-way game and look like the guy from Team Sweden over the Four Nations tournament versus the guy we saw the other day with his back turned and making it a wild play to whip the puck over to Malkin at the end of the periods, right? So teams are going to weigh that guy come playoff time. And so you could see Detroit make a push. Steve Yzerman at some point needs to get Detroit into the playoffs. They've been languishing since the Penguins kind of beat them in 2009. They've gone through a rebuild. I think Dylan Larkin gets a lot of pressure. I think he's a really good player. I still don't think he has the right type of players around him. And so they need a difference maker, and the best place to do that with their depth at forward is likely to bring someone in on defense. I do think their defense is a little weak behind Moritz Seider. And so I think there is a potential here for Karlsson to immediately step into a top 2D pair and, play, his natural with a good speed in Detroit. And so I also think Calgary needs help. I'm not impressed with their overall depth on defense. They've got plenty of cap space. They have draft picks, 2 of them in the first round this coming season, or this coming summer, excuse me. And so we'll see if that happens. But I do think if there's one team that I think could entice Karlsson because of tradition and being Steve Yzerman, I do think if Detroit comes calling and the Pens are willing to take a $2.5 million cap retention on a deal, the Pens are probably looking at a first round pick, probably to take back a defenseman with some term. It's cheaper, like a Justin Hall, who's got I think $2.5 million on his term for next year, and then maybe a third line center like a Michael Rasmussen, or maybe they look at a third, fourth line guy like Joseph Foligno. So that's kind of the type of deal that I think could happen if the Pens are willing to take that $2.5 million cap retention. The question for the Penguins will be, why do that now? Even if they do something next year, I don't know if they're really truly going to get a package even this summer with teams with more cap that will want to take on Karlsson just because of his style of play. And so if you've got someone like Yzerman in Detroit calling and saying, hey, we'll offer you a first, you take Hall, that allows us to get some, keep the cap space with the 2.5 of Hall and the 2.5 of cap retention. It's $5 million that they kind of save in the deal a little bit there overall, right? And so, and then you look at a guy like Michael Rasmussen. I think he's over $3 million, $3.5 million. I think he, for the Penguins, would be an ideal third line center who can really lock that position down for the team. They really need someone who can stay in that position here for a number of years. Another guy I really like is Ryan McLeod out in Buffalo. He was in Edmonton, and I think the Sabres got a steal for him. He hasn't exactly fit in Buffalo, of course, who does with their long-term struggles as an organization, especially under the ownership group that they have out there. So we shall see what happens with Karlsson. End of the day, I don't think he's going to get moved at this deadline. I just think that's a lot of moving parts. It probably needs to happen for Yzerman to do it. But if Detroit on Thursday, Friday looks to be out of a playoff spot, They may want to get back into it because they are in it right now. And so it's going to be neck and neck. And, I really think they need to get this over the hump and get that team, the young players like DeBrincat and Larkin and those guys who are kind of all in their prime, to get them to win. And so I think Yzerman is the one guy who is in a position to potentially do this and not get too criticized. And giving up a first round pick isn't a lot, and maybe some people will view losing a third line center like Rasmus is a willing trade off, right? And so I think that is probably the most ideal place for the Penguins to kind of focus on for Karlsson. But again, it takes two to tango. All right, so everyone, appreciate the time and listening on today's episode. Please leave us a like if you enjoyed that. Subscribe if you can. Leave us a comment. And until next time, keep your head up and the stick on the ice.